Welcome back to another episode of Wrench. Let's take a road trip. Welcome back, you guys. If you have watched the last two videos, you would have seen me upgrade my alternator to a 175 amp alternator from Classic Retrofit, as well as add a second condenser. So I'm going on a 4-day road trip through the middle of Death Valley where it's 125 degrees, which is really hot. And I wanted to upgrade my entire air conditioning unit so we could be somewhat comfortable going through these temperatures in a 52-year-old car. Now, I've upgraded the alternator. The problem was I couldn't test it because my battery was dead as a doornail. I've just gotten a new battery. I went to turn the key and nothing happens. Well, it turns out that it's really helpful if you connect the cable that goes from the battery to the starter, because then things work better. So let's find out if the alternator install worked. So now that all the heavy lifting is done from an upgrade standpoint, I want to get all the maintenance items on the car done. This car's about to do 1,200 really hard miles, twisty roads, and we're going to be at low altitude, high altitude, super hot temperatures, kind of cold temperatures because we're going to end up in Mammoth Mountain. So I want to make sure that everything is in tip-top shape for the car. I'm going to start with an oil change. And the reason I'm doing that now is because if I can change the oil, then I can actually drive the car over to the air conditioning place and see if our air conditioning upgrades worked. So one thing of note, if you're going to do an oil change on your car, it's not a bad idea to run it for a minute or two just to make the oil a little less viscous and let it flow a little bit better. Otherwise, it's pretty thick, and we want it to be a little bit warm, not like scalding hot so that when you pull the drain plug, it's going to burn your hand off. But you want it to be a little bit warm, just so it'll flow a little better. And this car is pretty interesting because it actually has two oil filters. It's got two filters on this engine, and then I've got a front oil cooler, so there's a ton of oil. So I've got 12 quarts of Mobil 1040, and let's get this thing jamming. Sometimes I forget how much of a mishmash my car is. I've got a 1995 993 engine, a Carrera oil tank from like an 85, a 1972 transmission. So sometimes it makes it weird to figure out what I need for what. In this case, I had the wrong oil filter, so I had to run all the way back to the Porsche dealership to get the right one. This is the correct one. In fact, the 993 has two oil filters. I had the actual 993 oil filter for this one. Anyway, it was the wrong one. So now I've got the right ones. We're gonna put a little dab of oil on, even though I heard it really doesn't mean anything. I've also cleaned my drain plug, so we will be ready to go and ready to fill this thing back up with oil. Now this car takes a whopping 10.5 quarts of oil. Make sure you put your oil drain plug back. Ask me how I know. Oh, that's so annoying. I just dumped it all over my engine. Oh my God, did you ever have a day in the garage where everything just goes wrong? That's today. Of course, I'm up against the clock. Get to the car this morning, battery didn't charge, have to go buy a new battery. Come back, get ready to do the oil change. All right, cool, good to go. Nope, got the wrong filter because I have this old oil tank and not the new one. So I drive over to the Porsche dealership, get a new filter. Get back home, start dumping oil in and go, holy crap, I forgot to drain the oil tank. I drained the engine case, but I forgot to drain the oil tank. And the local place that has the 040 oil is out. So I have to leave again, go over to the Walmart and get the right oil. So just a colossal pain in the, oh yeah, and then while it's filling the oil, the thing spills all over the engine. So it looks like I'm spraying for mosquitoes right now. Anyway, I've got to rush and get this rear bumper on the car so I can get it over to the air conditioning place. So hopefully they can help me charge the system up. So I'm here at Orozco's Auto Service with Servando Orozco himself. This is a beautiful facility in Long Beach, and they are nice enough to help me out by recharging my air conditioning system. Servando, how long have you had this beautiful shop?
This location for 14 years.
14 years. Now, were you a tech at one point and you've worked your
yes.
way up the ladder?
Yes.
So you get what
I'm
it's
a
like
technician.
to have greasy fingers like I do today.
Yes.
Right on.
I worked for 10 years for somebody else. I opened my first location 20 years ago, and now we own 5 locations.
Wow, 5 locations. Well, right on. Thank you so much for helping me with this.
My
I'm excited
pleasure.
to get some cold air. We're about to go through Death Valley,
Wow.
where it's 125 degrees. So I really need to get this air conditioning together. So thank you. If you guys are anywhere in the SoCal area and you want your car worked on, it looks like they work on everything, right?
Yes, we
There's
do
literally.
a lot of Porsches. We have
So
Porsches
talk into
on the
that.
back.
Talk into that microphone.
Sorry. We have Porsches, Mercedes. We do a lot of European cars. Land Rovers, Jaguars, you name it, we can fix it for you.
Well, I like Jaguars. I like how you say
Jaguars.
Jaguars. Anyway, this is Orozco's. If you guys want any more information on it or exactly where to find it, you can certainly look in Long Beach or you can DM me in the comments below. And thank you once again.
You can see our website, orozcosautoservice.com.
Oh, all right. Orozcosautoservice.com. I'll put it right here and I'll put a link in the description below.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just worried about leaking. You know, I connected 6 new hoses. All right, fingers crossed this is actually going to work. I hooked up all of these new hoses. I have no idea if they're going to be leaky or not. I'm praying. I'm praying that they're not, because I don't have a lot of time to mess with this. He's going to fire up this Cool Care Plus, which I think is all automated, and it can pressure test, and then it can fill the system. In the case of the Classic Retrofit, we need 23 ounces of R134. I think I got that right. This looks like an expensive machine from Snap-on. Well, we are very close to the moment of truth. This thing's been vacuuming for almost 30 minutes. We've got 3 minutes left before it gets into the pressure test, so fingers crossed that that all goes well. T-minus 20 seconds. And we're gonna see if this thing is gonna fully charge. Okay, so we've entered the pressure test portion of this whole exercise.
Okay, so we did the 30-minute vacuum test. In the 10 minutes, if the pressure, the gauge doesn't move, the needle doesn't move upward, then we pass. It's gonna say pass.
So we want to stay in the black.
We're gonna want to stay in the black.
Leak test failed. So that sucks. Now we gotta figure out where it is. Sometimes things don't go the way you hope they will. Thus was the case for the 2021 Targa California. Right after the video where the car failed the leak test, I fixed what I thought was the one leaky hose. It was the one all the way up in the corner. And we had to recharge the system. The problem with those systems at the shops is they need 30 minutes to completely vacuum out the lines. Then they charge the system, and if there's a leak, that's when you know there's a leak. But you have to wait like 35 minutes to find out if you actually have a leak in your car, which is total bummer with that machine. So in this case, it was 4:35 and the place closes at 5 o'clock. And Dave was helping me, said we're not gonna have time to charge it up again. And I was like, well, if we start it now, because I fixed it, if we start it now, we'll be done at like 5:15 or so. I go, would you be willing to stay till 5:15? And he says, no. And I go, I'll give you 50 bucks. I know that I've got 4 days and 125 degree temperatures, but he goes, no. And I go, 100 bucks. I'll give you $100 if you stay till 5:15. Wouldn't do it. So I left. I went home, and there's nothing I could do. I actually tried the next morning at a shop in Palmdale, and they were like, yeah, we can get to it at 2 o'clock and it'll be 200 bucks. And I was just like, ugh. So literally 4 days of some of the hottest weather California has seen in 30 years. No air conditioning. It was just brutal and such a bummer because I know it was gonna be great. So that's the first issue. The second issue is my starter was intermittent. on the trip. Sometimes when these cars get really hot, if your starter's kind of old, they don't start. So it left me stranded a few times where we had to push the car to start it. And it was such a bummer. One of them was during lunch and I was parked and the starter, what happened was my solenoid wire came off. And the solenoid wire is when you turn your key, it's the thing that sends the signal that says, all right, starter, go do your thing now. And it was off. It had fallen off and I had to get under the car, and the starter is really hard to get to when your wheels are on and your cars are on. So I had my whole outfit on and cars jacked up and I pulled the wheel off and I finally got to it, but it was a bummer. So the car was great other than that, but no AC and intermittent starter. So we're gonna solve both of those things, hopefully in this video, at least one of them. By the way, before I get started, how badass is the new colorway. This is orange, black, and this is kind of like a beige tan on the inside. And then this is the, I think I call this the Big Wrench shirt on the store. You could call it the Gray Ghost because it's kind of black on gray. It's a little subtle where the wrench is, but it's a really cool shirt. Vintage, super soft tee, fits well, mid bicep, good. And yeah, it's awesome. So I picked up a starter from AutoZone. I wasn't super worried about it. I'm not like, I don't need a high torque one like a race car. I didn't need the 8-pound lighter one. I've got a 3.6 in here. This is essentially replacing the one I have, so no big, but I'm gonna make sure the wiring is all dialed in and this thing is nice and new and doesn't strand me in the middle of the road. And then I did this. I went to Harbor Freight and I picked up a vacuum pump. This is one you connect to your compressor. And then I picked up their AC manifold gauge set, and I'm hoping to be able to charge my system myself instead of having to rely on shops. And that way, if anybody in SoCal wants one of these systems and I help them install it, we can pretty much do it all in the garage. Well, that was really messy. I had to do a partial engine drop because you really couldn't get a wrench on the top side bolt here. But good now, and I'm gonna throw this one in. I'm gonna actually fix one of the wires down there because one of the issues I had on the trip was the solenoid wire kept coming off. It's just a shit wire. So I'm gonna fix that first. All right guys, so it's in now. Definitely a partial engine drop is required just to get that top nut loosened up. And then I've extended this solenoid wire. I bound it together using one of those solder joints, and then I've got this good tape on there. Now I just need to reconnect, and I'll give the car a start and make sure it works, and then bolt everything back together. All right, that was a little more of a pain in the ass than I expected, but it's done. Here's the moment of truth. I'm gonna try to fire this thing up. I do have a small task I wanna do to my ignition switch, but I wanna see if all this stuff worked first. I gotta connect the battery and then turn the key and see if something cool happened. All right, successful starter and ignition projects. I'm actually gonna go off and play a little pickleball. I haven't been able to play in a couple weeks, and I'm gonna put the car back on the ground and drive it over there, just make sure everything's working cool. And then we will tackle the AC tomorrow to me, right now to you. Okay, so it's a couple days later and it's now time to get this air conditioning system dialed. I picked up a full compressor gauge kit from Harbor Freight. I picked up a vacuum pump from Harbor Freight, and I'm gonna try to see if I can get this thing filled up myself. Let me show you the current setup and what the plan is. So I grabbed this AC manifold gauge set from Harbor Freight. I wanna say it was like 69 bucks. And then this vacuum pump that you connect to your air compressor. First, I wanted to see if I had any kind of leak. So what you do is you hook up the blue low side to your blue low side. You hook up the red high side to your red high side. And then all you have to do is open these valves and you can shoot a little bit of compressed air in there. Now, Johnny recommends if you can get to like 150 PSI, that's a really good test because it'll really pressurize the system. My little compressor doesn't have, it only goes to 80, and my big compressor is not working right now, so I'm gonna work on that this afternoon. But one thing I noticed right out of the gates is that I had this thing, it was at 80 when I started, and now it's at about 75, so I definitely have a leak. And I'm not sure if you guys will be able to hear this, but if I pop my blue low lead off of here, let me put the mic right on it. Do you guys hear that? That is a leak right in the valve itself. You see it bubbling right there? Watch this. So I'm going to pull that valve out and see if I can maybe replace an O-ring and get it to seal. If not, I'm just going to replace the entire unit, and we should be good to go to vacuum this sucker. Okay, I've replaced this little guy, this little valve stem, and now I've just sprayed this thing with Simple Green and no leakage. It would appear as if this thing is right now holding at 88 PSI. So I think, you guys, I'm gonna try to start running a vacuum on this. And what that does is it's gonna remove any contaminants, any air, pretty much anything that's in these lines. So that way I have a completely sealed system. On the gauge, you can see here that this has basically like these red letters. You know, you've got 0 PSI here. It goes all the way up to 350. And then it's got 10, 20, 30. That's minus, so that's vacuum. We want to get this thing to 30, like negative 30 PSI. And to do that, I got myself a little air-operated vacuum pump from Harbor Freight. You hook your air hose up to it, and then I guess you just connect this yellow hose to one of these bad boys, and it sucks it into a vacuum. So that's what we're gonna do next, as soon as I figure out how to do it. So I'm now ready to vacuum the system. I've got my vacuum hose hooked up to the yellow line. I've got my air hose ready to go. And my inclination is as soon as this thing connects, it's gonna start creating vacuum. And then I'm looking for this minus 30, I think it's called mercury. I want that thing to be minus 30, and I want it to hold, because if it doesn't hold, that means we've got a leak still in the system. So let's give it a go, see what happens. Oh yeah, look, it's moving. So I'm just about at 30 now. I'm gonna close these and shut the vacuum off and let it seal. And hopefully it stays right at minus 28 or minus 30, right where it is right now, for a little while. All right, so here we are, like, it's been probably 2 hours, and I've lost just a couple of pounds of negative pressure. I was kind of maxed out right at that 30 line. Let me see if I can zoom this a little bit. I was maxed out just before the 30 line, and now I'm a little bit less. So it's a really small leak, but it's still a leak. Okay, I'm back a couple of days later, and I've done a tremendous amount of work on this air conditioning system. I discovered not only that I had a couple of leaks in my new hoses, but my fan on the previously installed condenser was completely frozen. And that was because, you know, it had 3-4 years of getting rocks and dirt and grime thrown into it. In fact, there was like a pile of gravel inside. So I'm definitely gonna have to put some stone guards in there. I cleaned everything out, I blew everything out, all is well in the world. It works great now. Now I've put this thing under vacuum for 24 hours, and it's got a very slight vacuum leak. So somewhere I still have a bit of a leak in the system. One thing I will say is that this entire process of air conditioning was really like magic voodoo to me before all of this, and now I have a much better comprehension of what's going on. I'm hoping to be able to impart some of that on you guys. Now I'm at the point where this thing is like losing a little bit of vacuum. Some of these Freon bottles have a sealant on the inside that will seal like really small minor holes. I'm hoping that is the case this time. If not, I'm gonna have to do dye, which is this stuff. I might still put it in anyway. Basically what you do is you put this dye in this yellow tube. It sucks the dye into the system so that if you have any leaks anywhere, you can make the room really dark or your garage really dark, put an infrared light on, and you can see where there's any kind of leaks in your system. So that's what that thing's for. As it is now, I'm just gonna kind of send it. I just wanna see if any of this process has worked or if I can get this air conditioning to work on my own. None of you guys will have to do what I'm doing here. The Classic Retrofit kit comes with everything, and because I've done so many weird modifications, that's where I'm getting some of these leaks. I'm also not using one of their condensers. I'm using one that I got from a Porsche Boxster. So it's very possible that the condenser itself is the thing leaking. If so, I actually have another Classic Retrofit condenser that I can use. I just like the orientation of the in and out valves on that condenser, which is why I used it. At any rate, I'm gonna give this thing a go now. What you do is I've got everything closed in the system at the moment, okay? So what I wanna do is, this is not burst yet. I've got this little valve all the way out. When I screw this thing in, it's gonna pop the top of the Freon, and that's gonna put this thing under pressure. I'm then gonna hit this little Schrader valve a little bit to make sure I get rid of all the air in the system. At that point, I open up all the valves and put the Freon into the system, close it up, and do it again. The Classic Retrofit AC takes 23 ounces of refrigerant. In this case, each can is 12 ounces, so it's like 1 extra ounce. You can do one of two things. You can put this thing on a scale and leave 1 ounce on the second bottle, or you can, I mean, Johnny said it wasn't like the biggest deal to get a little bit more than it's supposed to. It's not gonna really hurt anything. It's 1 single ounce of refrigerant. If you put way too much, then the compressor can be really overloaded. Hopefully we're not gonna do that. So I'm just gonna send it and see what happens and get this thing out for a test drive and see if my air conditioning works. All right, so first time doing this. I am closed here. I am open here. I've not pierced this can yet. My valves are open on the car. So I'm gonna screw this thing down and oops, and I've got a leak. All right, make sure that's tighter than I had it. That might have been a fail. I don't know what happened there. I had a leak in my yellow hose, and now I don't know if I'm out of pressure. Man, am I tired of undoing all of my work with rookie mistakes. I had the car running, I had the compressor running, it was sucking refrigerant into the system, all felt really well. I had the low side open, I had the high side closed, or so I thought. I had opened the high side so much that I kind of froze the knob, like I actually over-opened it. And it felt closed, but it wasn't closed. And this part of the process, the high side has to be closed so that it can pressurize. I did not do that, so I totally blew it. So I had to re-vacuum everything out that I just put in, and it's under vacuum right now. I'm gonna try this one more time. Both valves are open on the high side and low side on the car. Both valves are closed on the gauges. So I now can hook up the can to the yellow line. I can start the car and get the compressor going. I can purge the yellow line of any air. I'll show you guys what I do there. And then I can crank the low open, and hopefully it sucks all this refrigerant in, and we are good to go once again. Okay, doors are open. Let's hook up the yellow, just make sure this is closed and closed. Let's hook up my new cans. All right, valve is on the can. It's tight. This is on, I'm gonna pierce the can, and hopefully I don't get a big leak. Which I am getting a big leak. I don't know why that happens. Let's do this in the right order. Let's open this up a little bit. So now that's open. So that means it's under pressure to here. Air here. So I'm going to poke this Schrader valve. There we go. Now I have coolant. So now all the air is out. All the coolant is out. And it's ready to go. All right, compressor is running. Refrigerant is there. I'm still under vacuum. I'm going to open up the low side so I can hear the compressor running. And the high side is building pressure while the compressor goes back and forth. And the Freon can is being emptied. If you look in there, you can see, let's see. Yeah, you can see the Freon doing its thing. And the pressure continues to build. All right, things are going how they're supposed to. My fans are both running right now. And the system continues to pull the Freon into the lines. Okay, one can totally empty. I've disconnected it. I'm going to connect this second can. I have shut off the low valve and then screw this into the second can. Now Johnny said it was okay. This is going to be 24 ounces of refrigerant. The system calls for 23. I like to think that my situation in terms of like how I did all this probably wasted an ounce, to be honest, but I don't know that. I'm going to add a little oil with dye to this can. You pour it into the hose and that helps lubricate the compressor. On to can number 2. Open her back up. All right, fingers crossed. Go give the engine a couple of revs. Closing both valves. Removing them. All right, oh, that's cold air. So this was at 90 when I started this today. 62, 59, 58, 57. So this will get colder as I drive. So let's get the wheel back on, take this thing for a test drive, and see where we are. All right, I'm on the highway. For obvious reasons, I can't hold a camera. I've got my temperature, my thermometer here. I put it inside this tube. It is 45 degrees coming out. And I also have below me 45 degrees on my knees. So I'm going about 70 miles an hour. I've got a nice cool breeze on my face. And finally, I got this thing all dialed in. I could have done it so much easier had I just known what I was doing. Well, that was a bit of an arduous project, but it is done now. I'm super cool on the highway and it feels amazing. 99% of the agita in this project was because I was a rookie. I just made too many mistakes. I didn't know what to look for, etc., etc. Here's what I would do if I were you. Number one, the system is a no-brainer. It really does enhance your enjoyment of this vintage Porsche. So just get it. Figure out a way to get it. Okay, it's more expensive than what you might spend on like a Honda, but you're gonna keep this car. You're not getting rid of it. So you might as well be comfortable as you do it. If I didn't have a full shop setup, here's what I would do. If I had an air compressor, I would definitely test the system with the high pressure air hose before I took it to a shop. I would just make sure all the hoses are intact and you have no leaks. So I would do that. If you don't have an air compressor, you can buy from AutoZone or whatever a refrigerant kit that is in a big pressurized bottle and it's got a hookup for your low side. You can open that thing up, squirt a few pounds in, get 80 PSI, and then do the test with the Simple Green or the soapy water or whatever you want. So that's if you don't have a compressor. If you do, then just use the spray. At that point, once you've determined that your system is sealed, take it to an air conditioning shop, let them vacuum it, let them charge it, because that to me was kind of the biggest pain in the butt. It did require some specialized equipment. If I had to do the whole thing over again, I would have pressurized my system first before I took it over to Orozco's and then fixed it. However, I ran out of time. I didn't have enough knowledge to go that route. At this point though, it is sealed, it is cold. It was like low 42 degrees as I was driving, which was awesome. And now I have all the equipment to test and refill should I need to add another condenser or fix a line or whatever down the road. One question before I go, what do you think about tinted windows on a vintage Porsche? If I tinted even just the back window and the two sides, it would keep the entire cabin a lot cooler than it is now. I'm very much considering it because I take this car on long road trips, and with tinted windows and air conditioning, it really does make it a much more pleasurable experience. So let me know what you think about that in the comments, whether you like these cars with tinted windows or not, or whether you don't care at all. I've definitely heard opinions on this, so I'm curious what yours is. So hit me in the comments. Anyway, thanks so much for hanging with me for this. Again, it was sort of an arduous process. I'm glad I got it dialed in. I'm cool as a cucumber. And as always, high five. I'll see you next time.